Right after receiving a phone call from the murderer about their meeting place, a man guns down the murderer's informant before redirecting the driver to a new destination. This ex-con claiming to be the girl's biological father asks the man why a murderer is after their daughter. He explains that the assassin was originally hired for a separate mission but became unhinged. They soon arrived at the designated location, where the murderer had instructed them to go. However, as they prepared their ambush, the murderer intercepted the man first. The murderer then brought the man to where his daughter was being held, allowing him to see her lying unconscious. Relieved that his daughter was unharmed, the man woke her up. As they embraced, the man noticed his daughter's left wrist was chained to a crushing machine. Beside her was a saw, meant for him to cut off her wrist, mirroring his own past capture. Just then, the ex-convict appeared and confronted the murderer, giving the man a chance to free his daughter from the crusher. The murderer confessed a few minutes into the fight, revealing that the man had hired him to kill his wife. This enraged the ex-convict, who apparently harbored feelings for the deceased woman. A few days ago, a smuggler drove across the Colombian border and pulled into a garage. Once inside, the smuggler opens a crate, and Chris, the person being smuggled, climbs out. Just as Chris is about to leave, the smuggler immediately asks for money. Chris is confused and reminds the smuggler that he already paid the agreed-upon fee, but the smuggler insists on getting more cash. At the same time, the smuggler's partner walks up to Chris, forcing Chris to fight his way out of the situation. After taking down the smugglers, he grabs the truck keys and gets out of there. The following afternoon, Chris visits his ex-girlfriend's grave, and while he's there, he sees a car drive by and follows it. After following the car for a bit, he watches it park at a school to drop off a young girl. Hours later, the car returns Elisa, the young girl, to the mansion, where she walks in to joke around with Vicente, her father. On the other hand, a psychopathic murderer called El Corvo gets set up by a waitress working with the cops and is arrested. But while in the cop car, El Corvo slits the cop's throat, after which he creeps up behind the scared waitress to promise her the same fate as the cops. The following morning, while Elisa is on her way to school, a masked bum pops out from nowhere to clean her car's windscreen, ignoring the driver and bodyguard in the car asking him to stop. After cleaning the windscreen, the bum demands his pay, but when the driver refuses to pay him, he destroys the car's mirror. Annoyed by the bum's actions, the driver comes out to confront, only for the bum to suddenly knock him out. Seeing as the driver has been knocked out, the bodyguard tries to drive away, but the bum gets to him before he can. While the bum deals with the men, Elisa runs out of the car, but when the bum notices she's escaping, he rounds up his fighting, steals a car, and blocks Elisa with it. After blocking Elisa, the bum, who turns out to be Chris, drags her into the car boot and drives away. Moments after the abduction, Vicente beats up the driver before ordering his men to finish what he started. While his men beat up their impotent coworkers, Vicente calls one of his contacts and offers to reward him heavily if he finds his daughter. Meanwhile, Chris parks by the highway to let Elisa out of the boot, but once he lets her out, she hits him with a spanner and runs into the forest. Chris follows Elisa into the forest, and after calming her down, he claims that her mother had sent him to save her. Choosing not to believe Chris's claims, Elisa hurls profanity at him while pointing out that her mother died 5 years ago. Doubling down on his claims, Chris insists that her mother had asked him to find her and save her from Vicente, but, again, Elisa refuses to believe she needs to be saved from her father. To prove his claims that he's not there to hurt her, Chris loads his gun and drops it on the ground for Elisa to pick up. After a bit of contemplating, Elisa grabs the gun, confirms that it's loaded, and orders him to get into the car. In the car, Elisa threatens to blow Chris's brain out if he doesn't drive her back home, and when Chris calls her bluff, Elisa pulls the trigger only to realize that she's out of bullets. Surprised that Elisa would actually try to kill him, Chris curses her out, but Elisa curses right back at him, and after bickering for a while, Chris realizes they're low on gas. At the gas station, despite being instructed to stay put, the moment Chris gets distracted, Elisa escapes from the car and runs towards a few locals. Now that she's made the locals hold off Chris, Elisa rings her dad, and while she does, Chris reluctantly beats up the locals. After defeating them, Chris drags Elisa into the car and ties her up. In the car, while Elisa throws a tantrum, Chris blurts out that he's her father. However, Elisa, who had chosen not to believe Chris's wild claims, threatens to act crazy if Chris doesn't take her to get food, and as soon as Chris zooms off to a restaurant, one of Vicente's men trails them. At the mansion, shortly after Vicente's client updates him on Elisa's movement, his right-hand man rings El Corvo to inform him about the update. Meanwhile, in the restaurant, after Chris reveals that he was imprisoned for 15 years, Elisa warms up to him, and soon enough, they start talking about her mother. Mid-conversation, Chris mentions that Vicente had her mother killed, but Elisa refuses to believe him, and in that moment, Vicente's men approach Chris with a gun. While half the men drag Elisa into their car, the remaining half stay in the restaurant to distract Chris. But by the time he knocks them out, he realizes that the other men have taken Elisa, so he goes back into the restaurant to beat up a man into telling him where they've taken her to. Moments later, Elisa is dragged into an old man's office. In the office, the old man informs Elisa that he's her father's contact, before calling him and giving Elisa his phone to talk to him. Over the phone, Elisa asks her father if he killed her mother. Right after he denies it, Elisa tells him that her abductor claimed to be her real father. Shocked by Elisa's words, Vicente drops the phone, and while Elisa calls out to her father, El Corvo is seen attacking some men. Seeing that they're under attack, the old man drags Elisa away to hide her in his second office. After hiding her, the old man returns to shoot El Corvo. Luckily for him, El Corvo runs out of bullets, giving him an out to go back to the office. But unfortunately for him, when the old man enters the office, Elisa knocks him out. After knocking the old man out, Elisa grabs a gun and loads it. Now equipped with a loaded gun, Elisa comes out of hiding to shoot a few bullets at El Corvo, only for her to fire a couple shots and run out of bullets. Now that Elisa is defenseless, El Corvo goes after her. Luckily for Elisa, Chris walks in to detain him. While El Corvo beats him, Chris asks Elisa to run. Realizing that Elisa is escaping, El Corvo goes after Elisa, but Chris tries to block him. Right after knocking Chris over, El Corvo continues pursuing Elisa, but Chris shows up again and pushes him out of a window. Shortly after they land, the old man shows up with a loaded gun. As the old man rains bullets on them, Chris chooses to hide while El Corvo approaches the old man, now out of bullets, to slit his throat. With the old man gone, El Corvo and Chris continue their fight, but this time, Elisa arrives with a car and runs El Corvo over. Instead of getting into the car, Chris grabs Elisa and flees. While Chris and Elisa are walking on an open street, El Corvo approaches two bums and hijacks their car. Still on the street, Chris tells Elisa her diamond necklace was actually a gift he gave her mom many years ago to signify her strength. At night, Chris leads Elisa into a random car, and in the car, after Chris seizes Elisa's gun, he scans the map. But before he can say anything, Elisa declares she isn't getting out of the country with him. Regardless of her refusal, Chris announces that he is taking her to her mother's sister in the United States, and this announcement makes Elisa crash out at Chris. Mid-crash out, the owner of the car approaches them, and Elisa uses the opportunity to trick Chris into going outside so that she can zoom off without him. Realizing that he's fallen for Elisa's trick, Chris tries to wave at the car approaching him, but when the car ignores him and goes after Elisa, he recognizes that it's El Corvo, so he runs to save Elisa. After a few minutes of driving, Elisa parks to use the street phone, but before she can, she sees El Corvo coming for her. In an attempt to escape, Elisa runs away, but El Corvo catches up to her. Before he does anything, she escapes from his grip to find Chris, who has begun calling for her. Before she gets to Chris, El Corvo catches up to her, exchanges a few shots with Chris, and then points a gun at her, making Chris surrender. The following morning, Vicente gets out of his car after seeing Chris tied up to a pole, execution style, by the road. Moments later, in Vicente's car, El Corvo calls him to not only set up a meeting place but also to expose his informant. And in response, Vicente shoots his right-hand man before asking his driver to take him to the venue. After Vicente passes his order, Chris asks him who El Corvo is, and in response, Vicente reveals that he hired El Corvo for a job, but along the way, El Corvo went overboard, so he decided to teach him a lesson, but before he could, El Corvo escaped and lost his left wrist in the process. Vicente adds that El Corvo had cut one of his hands off to escape, and ever since then, he has sought vengeance against him. Soon enough, Vicente's car arrives at the meeting place, and Vicente asks Chris to ambush El Corvo while he and his men take care of him from the front. Unfortunately for Vicente, El Corvo ambushes him and takes him to see Elisa. Seeing as Elisa is unconscious, Vicente shakes her awake, and while they hug, Vicente realizes that El Corvo had not only strapped Elisa's left arm to a deadly machine, but had also provided a saw for Vicente to cut her wrist free. Realizing that his cryptic message has been passed, El Corvo activates the machine right before turning to shoot Chris. So while Chris distracts El Corvo, Vicente searches for a way to stop the crushing machine from dragging Elisa into its mouth. While fighting Chris, El Corvo reveals that Vicente had hired him to make Elisa's mom disappear. El Corvo's revelation angers Chris into attacking El Corvo again, and as he attacks El Corvo, Vicente, on the other hand, decides to use the saw. Meanwhile, El Corvo tells Chris about how Vicente had hired him to take his wife's life, but he got carried away and killed her for real. El Corvo adds that even though he went out of line, Vicente must pay for his lost arm. After minutes of struggling, Chris manages to overpower El Corvo, but right after he does, El Corvo uses his arm hook to slash Chris's stomach. Despite being injured, Chris runs towards Elisa, who had begun using the saw to cut off her hand. Before he gets to her, El Corvo attacks him again, but he manages to break free. As soon as Chris joins Vicente, El Corvo comes at him again, and this time around, El Corvo sticks his hook into Chris and kicks him away. With Chris out of the way, El Corvo holds his hook to Vicente's throat and forces Vicente to confess that he paid him to kill Elisa's mother. Ignoring her father's confession, Elisa screams as she's about to be crushed. But when Chris reminds her that her diamond necklace is indestructible, she grabs it and throws it into the machine. Luckily for Elisa, the diamond breaks the chain of the machine. But before she gets off the machine, El Corvo tries to push her into the crusher. To stop him, Chris attacks her, and while Chris fights El Corvo, Vicente grabs the saw and uses it to slit the nape of his neck. Instead of falling off the high ground alone, El Corvo drags Vicente with him. A few days later, Chris approaches Elisa at her mother's grave to drop a flower. Suddenly, Elisa calls Chris her father, and while Chris embraces her, a quick flashback reveals that El Corvo's body has disappeared. Now that there's a possibility of El Corvo being alive, do you think he will come back for another revenge? Or do you think he would back off now that Vicente is dead? Tell us your predictions in the comments. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. Until next time, guys, peace out.